Well, we made it. An off season that dragged along, but the NCAA volleyball season is back. And for the first time in 2 years, we had pre-conference tournaments. It was a ton of fun. Welcome into episode 4 of 6 Rotations, a weekly volleyball show covering everything around the country alongside Mick Haley. I'm Daniel Gillman. We're powered by SNA Sports, better equipment for a better game, as there was a ton of great matches here this weekend, Mick. And before we dive into what I know you all want us to do, and that's break down the top 25 AVCA poll, let's get a little bit of a summary of what were your favorite moments of the weekend and what really stood out to you, Mick.
Well, I have a bunch of them, but there were some great upsets, the small teams doing some wonderful things. And I'll just throw a couple out to you to see what you think. But one of your favorites, Wright State, got all over Michigan State in a 3-2 win. Denver, the team you haven't heard much about, takes USC, 2,000 people in the stands, takes them out 3-2. I liked Western Kentucky holding their seed by beating Notre Dame 3-0, and that is a booty kick in there. That was pretty good by Western Kentucky. South Carolina proved that they're here to stay, beating two teams, Washington State and Rice. That was nice. I kind of liked Coastal Carolina beating Iowa 3-0. Big Ten is not going to like that much, I don't think. And then another one that was good, Northern Colorado over Northwestern, a 3-2.
Well, let's take a look at how the teams did, as you saw on the graphic there. Big Ten, 27-7. The ACC was really, really impressive. Pittsburgh might have been the most impressive team of the weekend. Serena Gray, an early favorite for transfer of the year as the ACC, 35-6, with NC State accumulating half of those losses. They lost 3 of the ACC 6 matches. Pac-12 and SEC played well, but then you've got the Big 12. They had a very tough weekend as we jump into what you guys want us to talk about, and that's the AVCA poll. Let's take a look at our top 10 teams. We'll go kind of tier by tier here, but as you see them all, we'll talk a little bit about the top 10. What stood out to you most? Is it, the fact that 1, 2, 3 stayed the same, or a little bit of a mix up there at the bottom?
I like 1, 2, 3 in that order. I think the coaches did a pretty good job with that. I have 2 other teams, though, that I think need to be in that top 5, and I would have Ohio State and Pitt in there. Pitt's the team that really got the shaft on this particular poll, probably by accident. They just didn't pay attention, but Pitt had 3 really good wins, and they go from 9th to 7th. That I don't see that, but I would move Nebraska and Florida down into the next 5 until they prove something. Nebraska had a hard time with Kansas State. I don't know if you watched that match.
Yeah, it was
fun match to watch. Fun match to watch. I know Nebraska had a couple players out, but they're loaded. They should just next man up, so to speak, coming in there and playing for those guys. And I like the second 5. I think the second 5 are good. I just have them in a little bit of order, but I had Nebraska at 6, Baylor at 7, Minnesota at 8. I wouldn't penalize Minnesota much for losing to Baylor. I think Baylor was good. Nice comeback by Baylor there in the 4th set, right?
It was. I mean, if I remember correctly, I feel like Hugh McCutcheon always struggles a little bit in this pre-conference play, and then it has people doubting him, and then they run rampant through the Big Ten. So I kind of predicted that Presley, and we saw Skinner, and answered questions from our preseason episodes. The biggest, though, I think we've got to come out here and just say, Craig Skinner, right? Round of applause for what Kentucky did this weekend. They did not blink. They dominated Dayton. They ran through a good Texas State team, and they're sitting there at number 3, well earning the spot above Nebraska, Florida in that second tier.
Yeah, I think that's true. I agree with that. And no put down to Purdue or Florida. I'm just waiting for them to play some quality teams, a little higher quality than they have been. And I think they can earn their place back up there. But I like to see the teams earn their way into the poll, not just get in there because of their conference or one win or one loss here or there. So I like the top 10. I think the coaches did a good job.
Let's look at our kind of second tier here, 11 through 20, as we break this down. And Washington had a big fall. They went from number 4 down to number 11. Of course, the upset from Ohio State, and a lot of people clamoring we're going to have our upset of the weekend. I think Ohio State is as good of a team in the Big Ten as there is. So to me, that wasn't the biggest of upsets, right? They're playing at home. They had a crazy crowd in the basketball arena there, and Ohio State looking really nice in those uniforms too. Dominated. A couple other headlines. Western Kentucky at number 15 is their best ranking in program history. And then Penn State fell a little bit, and you see those slew of Pac-12 teams at 18, 19, and 20.
Yeah, I really think we could have a top 11 with Washington in that group. Washington got penalized, but they were fourth. They were ranked high, and they got beat by a lower team, even though it's top 10 team. I think they can earn their way back up there. Okay, Louisville, BYU, Penn State got penalized a little bit more than I would have. I would have had Penn State around 14, maybe. I want to see Oregon beat some people. I think Western Kentucky's holding good. UCLA had a heck of a time beating Davis this weekend. Davis could have won 3-0. Davis had them in the second set after winning the first set, only to give up 2 points at the end. Then they lost again in the third set by 2 points. I really think UCLA has to show more to hold that position.
Yeah, you mentioned Penn State. They had that tough first one. We'll talk a little bit more about the fact how frustrating it is. Our first big match of the weekend, the first big match of the season, and you can't watch it, right? We want to see Brambilla dominating and what Johnny Parker brings to the table. And Parker did have a fantastic bounce back match, as UCLA too only played one match. So hard to kind of tell where Mac May and that slew lies out there. This second weekend, I think, will be a little bit more telling, right? They always say the first weekend is for the overreactions and the second weekend is for the truth. But there are some fun storylines here on our final 5 teams. And we've got 3 newcomers into the poll from the preseason to the first week. That's Michigan, South Carolina, and Marquette. And the South Carolina Gamecocks get their first ranking since 2002. If you take away the spot that they had early in the season last year, because there weren't a lot of teams playing in the fall. So their first true ranking in almost 20 years, and boy, did they earn it.
Well, Tom Mendoza's team really stepped up. I mean, they played 3 very good matches, beating Rice. That was a good match because Rice is good, but that whole tournament turned out to be better than we thought, with Washington State, South Carolina, doing battle, and then Pittsburgh. I mean, that turned out to be a great tournament. South Carolina deserves their position, winning 2 out of 3 there. I thought Rice and Washington State should have gotten a chance to play. They didn't play the third match. Pittsburgh played 3, South Carolina played 3, but the other 2 only played 2. I was disappointed because I wanted to see Washington State Rice.
Yeah, and I was going to give my match or my team of the weekend to whoever won that South Carolina Pitt one, and the Panthers looked really strong. It was annoying to watch those matches because of the camera angle, and we'll talk a little bit more about that in our next segment, but they're well-deserving. The SEC, watch out, right? You picked LSU. They had a tough one with Michigan. Michigan looked really good on their opening weekend. Remember, the Wolverines really struggled to even play matches in the 2021 spring season. Their first couple weekends were canceled. Then they finally got going, and they had another stoppage. So that's a team to watch out for. They've got a girl in Jess Merzick that is an absolute standout. And then you see Washington State and Marquette are tied at 25. The exact same amount of votes. They each got 104 total points adjusted. And so it's interesting to see an 0-2 team in Washington State. They also fell 7 spots, but I think Marquette and Creighton, a team that is the first to not get the top 25, right? They're the first in receiving votes, sitting at number 26. And those are 2 teams in the Midwest to watch out for.
Yeah, Creighton, I think, will move up, but they got to beat some higher quality teams, which they have on their schedule. So the interesting thing is to wait for these next two weeks so we can see these matches, because it's going to solidify positions a little bit, and we're going to find out who just had a good weekend and who's going to play consistent down the road. I was disappointed. Washington State didn't do better. Rice had a tough schedule. I thought they might do a little bit better, but I'm not disappointed. Notre Dame didn't show the way I thought they should have, and LSU Didn't get the performance from DeBerg, the transfer that I've been talking about. So I'm sorry to lead you astray there. If DeBerg shows up, then I think I can talk about LSU a little bit more again. Then another team that I expected a little bit more out of was Texas State. I thought they would show better in the Cincinnati, Dayton, Kentucky weekend. And they played hard and they played close, but they weren't able to win. And so they went out of their 0-3, so they had to drop out a little bit.
And then Notre Dame and Rice both sitting in the 27 and 28 spots, or actually because of the tie for 25, you could actually push that back. So Creighton at 27, Notre Dame 28, Rice also tied with that. And then Tennessee, Hawaii, Denver gets some votes. So that's awesome for them. And then UNLV didn't play Mariana Hayden, and that was a big storyline, right? They swept through their opening weekend and, looked good, but at the same time, when you don't have your player of the year candidate, it's going to cause some question marks, but they get some votes. Illinois had a tight one with Santa Barbara. They also received some votes. And then Loyola Marymount, who played Purdue pretty tough in that opening one, LMU wrapping out our receiving votes spot. But Mick, you were able to watch your heart's desire of volleyball here this weekend. You told me it was kind of comparative to the NCAA tournament when you get to see 4 matches all at the same time. You don't know which one to focus on at once. No. You don't know whose voice you want to listen to from the broadcaster's standpoint. Walk me through some of your biggest storylines.
Well, first, can I just throw 2 teams at you that didn't get any votes that I think deserve consideration? First of all, I was impressed with the athleticism of Central Florida. They played Penn State tough. They played Georgia Tech tough. Those were good matches. I'm not sure why their conference is not supporting them. I would think that they would be wanting to vote that team up for RPI reasons, and they're good enough to do that. The other one I think got left out a little bit was Dayton. Dayton's a good team. They showed last spring they can play in the tournament, and they played hard, and they're good, and they deserve some consideration. So I would put those 2 teams on the radar.
That was that was a fun 5-setter. I was able to watch. Able to watch here and there. I was working out in Wyoming for a tournament this weekend, but that Dayton against Cincinnati 5th set, Dayton ran away with it. It was a good match.
Yeah, and so to move on though, I went and watched Texas play. And they're as good as advertised.
And they ran a 6-2, which was that question mark that we were talking about, right?
Very little, but they did run it. Yeah.
I just remember seeing that. I saw that storyline.
Yeah, they ran it a little bit. Coach Elliott said he was trying to look at lineups, but they've only got 2 lineups, let me tell you. And they're going to go back and forth, maybe a player here, a player there, but they're pretty much unchanged. We know what they're getting. Wisconsin matches, even though they boat raced Baylor 3 out of the 4 sets, Baylor showed when they switched Presley to the right side and played Skinner and Harrison left, that they took that 3rd set from Wisconsin. Wisconsin showed maybe they have some weakness in the left side attack. We have to watch that to see how that works. Normally you would think Wisconsin's on par with Texas, but I don't think they're as good yet. So that will be interesting to watch. Kentucky, we just need to see them play next week. They get USC, they get Creighton, and they get Northern Iowa. And so it's going to be interesting to see what happens with those 3. We get to see that. I particularly enjoyed the Baylor-Minnesota match. Back and forth. Samity, of course, very good. Landfair for Minnesota, very good. Baylor, the 3 players I mentioned, they're doing a little bit different things in the middle. Baylor is the most creative of all the teams I saw this weekend. They used their left-handed right side player, and her name escapes me, but it's Van something. You'll help me with that. They moved her into block middle and then hit her outside on the right side. With the setter moving to the middle, and it created some really nice opportunities for Presley down the middle on the Bick. And so they're really showing some creativity with their players. So I'm thinking some of the other teams are going to start picking up on this, and we're going to start seeing another level of creativity in the college game with coaches figuring out how they can better use their players. So I enjoyed those matches a lot.
All right, ready? Marika Vandermark. There we go.
Thank you. That's the girl.
She's been one that stands out in the postseason, but she had a good it's funny too. And I kind of want to talk about this for a second. The players and some of the coaches always refer to this as the preseason, right? They say preseason because I guess for them, the conference play is the season. But for me and maybe for other broadcasters, it's always interesting. I like to just call it pre-conference play as opposed to preseason. What have you always thought about that?
Well, I wouldn't call it preseason. I call it pre-conference, and I think it's misstated when they call it preseason.
Okay, so we're in agreement.
You don't think it counts, and I would encourage the coaches not to use that because it counts a lot, and it counts in their RPI. Let me tell you. So I think pre-conference is really the word that you want to use. One last thing on Ohio State, Emily Landau's team, along with Mac Perdoza, the setter, were as advertised good. And I mean, not just good, they were really good. And I was shocked at how good the setter was late. Mac was just playing uninhibited, 6'2" setter, having fun like that is hard to deal with. And Ohio State's going to be a factor in the Big Ten. What'd you think of their jerseys? I kind of teased this over on Twitter, and if you guys are all on Twitter, go check us out at 6 Rotations. They went with the professional look, right? The USA Women's National Team tank top style, but I loved the cursive, the script in the front of Ohio State. Yeah, there's several jerseys out there that are showing a little bit different. I thought maybe we were seeing the NBA where the Lakers were playing with green uniforms.
Yeah,
that drives me nuts when they do that, incidentally. But I'm sure it's fun for the players and fun for the fans. And I saw in the Texas store online, they had green Texas basketball jerseys. I'm sure some of these diehard Texas fans are rolling over in their grave.
Maybe it's just like a Shamrock style, right? For the middle of March, something like that. We'll kind of write that off, but let's pull back up these numbers of different conferences and how they did, because I mentioned the Big 12, they struggled. ACC might've been the most impressive conference. I think they had like 11 sweeps or something like that. They really showed out well, aside from our guy in Lucas Slabe. NC State did not have the greatest opening weekend, losing all three, but the Pac-12, 21-7, the West Coast Conference, we had high hopes about them, but we know that they're pretty top heavy, right? With San Diego and BYU and Pepperdine. St. Mary's had a clean weekend, but they were 14-13. The Big West, right? Playing for the first time since 2019, Mick. Hawaii played well. They swept Texas A&M. They didn't fare too well against Marquette, but overall, a conference that is going to sit there in the bottom of those RPIs. They were 14-17.
Yes, we need to watch them quite a bit, because the expectation is they're going to get better and better and better. So Hawaii has lost to Marquette. At first, I think caused everybody to have concern for Hawaii. Coming back so strongly against A&M now puts the onus on A&M. Are they going to compete in that conference, or are they not going to be competitive? So it's unknown, but Marquette had two good matches. So they deserve to be up ahead of Hawaii right now. And let's see what Robin Amo can come up with out in Hawaii with that Wahine team.
Yeah, so A&M has a midweek match against Cal Poly out here in California. As we take a look at some of our midweek madness here and some games to watch this weekend, it starts with a fantastic one, right? Florida at Stanford, Tuesday at 8 o'clock Eastern. No idea how we're going to be able to watch that, right? Pac-12 networks, whatever that means. So hopefully everyone can get their Maples fill there. And then the next night, same time, 8 p.m. Eastern, this one available, right? Big Ten Network with Texas at Minnesota. Which one are you more excited for?
Boy, I don't know. I want to see if Stanford can play, and I want to see who Florida is going to play on the right side. So I like that match because I'm interested in that. But I think Texas, Minnesota is going to be brutal. Minnesota came back last year after an early loss, and they were tough to deal with for a couple months. So Texas really better be ready for that one. Who do you like Thursday's matches? I mean, Thursday, you got a couple, maybe three that are really good there.
All weekend long, right? Let's talk about some of the biggest ones of the weekend. You can walk me through Thursday, but I've got my mind set that Baylor-Pittsburgh is going to be the match of the month. September starts, and I am ready for Pittsburgh to have the competition up there.
Yeah, so I think we'll see something. These are two teams that I believe can be in the Final Four, and they have depth. You're right about Serena Gray. She's really the real deal for Pittsburgh because she's taken over the middle. Was a position that wasn't bad for Pittsburgh, but certainly have improved there. I like that. I'm interested in little matches like Dayton versus Wisconsin,
Yep.
Purdue and UNLV, and Oregon and Rice all Thursday. They're not the Final Four matches, but they're matches that are going to show us something there. And Friday,
Hayden, they need Hayden to play though, right? If UNLV has Hayden, then I think that one kind of creeps up my rankings. But the Rice matchup is curious because Oregon didn't have too much talent that they had to face in the opening weekend.
And Friday night, I want to see Purdue against Washington State. Now, I feel like that's an even matchup, even though I was disappointed in the way Washington State played. They didn't score well from the outside this last weekend. So Purdue's strong on the outside. So we'll see Cleveland, we'll see Newton, we'll see some really good outside hitters in that Friday night match. And then UCLA plays Georgia Tech. Finally, they're going to play somebody. Brembama there for Georgia Tech has been great so far. So UCLA, Mac May has got to handle that. And then I like to see USC and Kentucky. USC has got talent that's not playing. I'm not sure why Kentucky is playing their talent. And so that's going to be a good one.
Let me interrupt here. I really am curious with that tournament out in Salt Lake City because Utah will face San Diego and Hawaii. That should be a good challenge for Danny Drews and company. And then maybe Illinois, Washington could be one of those matches that if Washington falls, how far do they fall down in those rankings? That's one to keep an eye on. And then, of course, it seems like they play every year, either in pre-conference play or in the postseason, and that's Florida against Minnesota. That'll wrap up the ones that I'm most excited for.
Yeah, and that's Sunday, right?
Yep.
That Florida, Minnesota, and that gives Minnesota two top 4 or top 10 matches for sure. Again, this week, Minnesota is one of the 3 best schedules in the country. Stanford, one of the 3 best schedules. And I believe Baylor, one of the 3 best schedules. We're going to see them a lot here in the next 2 or 3 weeks. And that's going to tell us a lot, I think.
So let's get into some of our fun stuff, right? 6 rotations. So we're going to run through some segments here, some 6 fun segments. And it starts with our fan poll. And that's the biggest upset. Make sure to follow us on Twitter at 6 rotations. You can vote every Sunday for the biggest upset of the weekend. Sometimes we'll throw out some other questions for you guys, some polls. But it was Denver over USC. That one ran away with it over 50% of the vote. Denver's first win against a Pac-12 team since 2007.
Question will be, is that really an upset, or is Denver coming into its own? Because nobody knows. So that's one that I took as a big upset. You know, one for next weekend that Ball State upset Northern Iowa. Nobody calls that an upset, but that's a big win for a MAC conference, right?
Yeah, when is Ball State women's volleyball going to make a little bit more noise? You've got all of the talent in the world over there, Mick. You've got all the coaching, you know, the trees have all like started out there, but for some reason, Ball State women's volleyball just hasn't quite taken that leap. But let's give a little bit more love to some mid and low majors. Our classic comeback of the weekend. Did a lot of digging. There were a lot of good contestants for this one, but we're going to go with Hofstra. Hofstra against Central Connecticut State. It was just a wacky one. Central Con State took the first 2 sets. The third set, Hofstra fought off 5 match points, won the third set 35-33, which is a new school record for the amount of points played in a set. And then they went on to get the reverse sweep. That was a fun one. We've got a few mixed nits to pick. The first one from me, though, I'll start with this. You've got to be able to stream some of these big matches. We talked about it a little bit earlier in the show. I want to watch Penn State versus Georgia Tech early in the morning on opening day. Show me Louisville against Cal Poly, right? There were a couple other ones that we may have gotten awkward camera angles to. That's the other nit, right? The one in the Milwaukee tournament where we saw Illinois and Santa Barbara playing from like the 50th row. And then what was going on in South Carolina, Mick? You were telling me there was some illegal situations on the sidelines of how much distance the players had.
Yeah, I thought that was interesting. The South Carolina, you only had 6 feet or so on the right sideline near the players' benches, and you had about 14 feet on the left sideline. So I'm not sure what was going on with that. And then I paid for the Big Ten Network and didn't get a score. I could listen to the game, I could watch the game, but I couldn't get a score. I had to use my cell phone
Plus,
to get
you gotta
scores. That was pretty interesting, and I'm sure they're going to hear about that. One last thing.
Go ahead.
From my end, we talked a lot over and over and over about the score for the team on the left side being the score for that team. And invariably, and I know that the television tells you that they do this in advance, but if your team was on the left side, their score was on the right side, and vice versa. And that was more happened that way than did not. And so very difficult for new watchers to know which team was which on the scoreboard.
I'm not going to defend, but a lot of students are running these matches, right? BTN, Student U, and everything like that. Great situation, great opportunity for them, and maybe just working out a few kinks in the system. It's been a long off season for them. Let's get to our wackiest of the weekend, and we've got two fun ones for you. I was able to broadcast a tournament, the Rumble in the Rockies. Great match, tournament name. Siena was there with Wyoming and St. Mary's, and Siena's head coach, Vilas Ozels, comes to me and says, we had a disastrous plane fly from New York to Wyoming. They put frozen fish above all of the players' luggage. So when they land in Laramie, gross, smelling like frozen fish. The jerseys are soaked. The socks and the shoes and everything, they had to dry it off. Luckily, Ozels used to coach there for the University of Wyoming, so he had some connections, but that is just the wackiest scenario. They had a tough time bouncing back from that, unfortunately, unable to win a set in that weekend. But that's not as bad as the one that you sent me, Mick. Walk me through this. We've got a picture for you.
My wife's a graduate of the University of Texas. I coached there. So we get emails, and we got an email 2 days ago that showed a picture of 2020 National Championship shirt, University of Texas Women's Volleyball NC2A Championship. Holy cow, what is this? I thought Kentucky won 2020. And I think somebody in their marketing wisdom wanted to drive traffic to that website to sell uniforms and that sort of thing. And you go on the site and there's not one volleyball piece of equipment. It's all basketball and football.
It doesn't make any sense. It doesn't even like line up with why you would want to do that, right? They talk about the Patriots perfect season shirt that got sent out to Africa to the kids that couldn't quite afford shirts. So maybe that's where all of the Texas championship gear is, but funny that they would send it to you too, right? Of all the people that might get this, it's Mick Haley, the former Texas national championship coach. And you're like, wait a minute, 2020. No, Texas did not win a national championship in 2020. So that's our wackiest of the weekend. Then we've got like a twofer here, right? Match of the weekend and most impressive weekend for me lined up with the same team. And while there were a couple good contestants for match of the weekend, Illinois and Santa Barbara had a good one. Northern Colorado at that 18-16 win over Northwestern. But for me, it's going to Pitt Rice, right? When you don't lead in the fifth set, Mick, until it's 15-14, and then you take it 16-14, Pitt had a phenomenal weekend. They beat Washington State. They beat Rice. They beat South Carolina. And that Rice one was a dandy.
And that's why I don't write Rice off, even though they lost matches there this weekend, because they were in every match they played. Rice is a good team. They had an unfortunate experience last spring when they were going to the Final Four and they had a COVID case that knocked them out. I'd like to see good things happen to Rice. I think those kids have worked hard. Their coaches have worked hard. I think they'll be back, and they need to win some of these matches to do it. But that was a good one. Pitt had played two tough matches before that, and they came back and had the stamina and endurance to get on top of them at the right time. I'm sure Rice is seething over that, and will like to have a second chance. And I do think they've got Texas coming up, so they've got somebody they can take it out on.
And they have taken it out on them in the past, and maybe a little bit more partial to Pittsburgh, because we had a great talk with Ende and Lund last week. So go ahead and check out our third episode if you missed it. I do want to give a little bit of respect. I know we're going to get some hate, but can't cover everyone. Georgia Tech also had a really impressive weekend. They were probably my second, but then when Pittsburgh just demolished South Carolina on that finale, had to give the nod to the Panthers. But Georgia Tech gave UCF their first home loss since November 2019. So that's got to be something that you keep an eye on, because going on the road in any of those tournaments is always going to be tough. But we've got a great slate for you. Midweek madness Awesome tournaments this weekend. We'll be back on Tuesday to break down the week 2 top 25 poll. For Mick Haley, I'm Daniel Gillman, and this is Six Rotations.